but there was an article that came out June 23rd about the proposed overtime rule now projected to come out in the fall. So to give you guys a little bit of history on this, twice a year the government they publish a report about the list of regulations that are under consideration for the next year for all government agencies. Now, if you don't know about this and you're so curious, if you want to know what's coming down the pipeline from all of these agencies, you can actually go to a website. It is reginfo.gov/public. And there's a ton of information out there. And what you can see is that the Department of Labor that oversees the overtime rules, Joey, on their spring agenda that was actually just published, what was that, last week, there's a couple of items that are on the Department of Labor's list of the agenda. So things that are under consideration for the next year. And for anybody who has employees, this is applicable to them. So pretty important that they listen up.
Yeah, and I think this is an important conversation to unpack for small businesses because we're often faced with the question of, hey, will you keep us compliant? And what I like to tell businesses is, well, first, the answer is yes. But second, I try to explain to them that a rule isn't just passed overnight, right? So even looking at this site for reginfo.gov, to your point, there are proposals and then there's final rulings. And then once even things are final, there is a typical waiting period that the government allows you to get in compliance. So you've got to be asleep at the wheel for a very long time before something happens. But if you're not looking for it at all, you wouldn't even know that you're asleep at the wheel. So I just wanted to give a little bit of context around kind of the state and nature of how the federal government creates policy, puts it in place, and then holds you accountable. And the fact that we're always looking for these sorts of things.
Right. Yeah, that's a really great point. And we recognize that small business owners are super busy and it may be difficult to find the time to get out there. And even if you do go out to the website, it's very content heavy. So there's just so much out there that even if you read it, it may be difficult to understand. And I would say that individuals in the legal profession, they love this site because they're following it regularly and then they're providing their interpretation of what the potential impact is of those laws to the various companies and others that may be impacted by these change. And so I do think it's great to go out there and follow or partner with a company like Jumpstart to make sure that you're evaluating what's coming through the pipeline and how it can impact you. So to kind of bring us back to the article and the Department of Labor spring agenda, there's a few key things that I wanted to point out from this article and also from the reginfo.gov site that I think small employers, or actually all employers, but specifically small businesses, I think really need to think about the potential impact on this. So on the Department of Labor's list, I would say very, very high is addressing the minimum wage for workers that are currently in an exempt status and the real possibility that they may be raising the minimum salary level for those that are in an executive, administrative, and professional exemption. So if they raise that minimum salary level, right now it's at $35,568, but there's talk that they might be raising it as high as $47,000. And if some advocate groups have their way, it may even creep into the 60s, potentially the 70s. So Joey, what can you imagine that impact could have on not only small businesses, but like all businesses? And how significant is that in your opinion?
Yeah, there are a few things here, and I'd love to unpack this a little bit more in my roundtable this month. But when you raise, well, so first of all, what this basically says is as long as you make over this amount, you don't have to pay someone overtime. Again, it's only one test, it's only one slice of the pie. But many times we don't look at all of the tests, we don't run jobs through job analysis to determine does it pass all the tests. So, a startup or a nonprofit or any company that is not as savvy or on top of HR labor law might say, okay, I want to hire an employee. I'll pay them 40,000 a year. They're exempt from overtime, so we don't have to pay them if they work more than 40 hours in a week. But that isn't always true. Now, by raising, and it's not always true because again, the duties test. But when you lift that lid from 35,568 to let's just go to the extreme to 80K, what that then says is anyone who makes under 80K is eligible for overtime. So, regardless of what duties you have them doing, regardless of what level of management they are, if they're making less than 80K, you would have to first of all track their time, calculate their time, make sure that you have a system in place for um, tracking, authorizing or approving overtime, and then paying out overtime. We could go into more, pros and cons about this, but that's the biggest thing to wrap your head around is think about the employees on your team that are currently at a certain salary level, 35K or more, and then who's at that 47, who's at that 60, who's at that 80, and what adjustments might you need to make. Because if I'm an employee and I find out that I am on a salary and you're working me 50 hours, 60 hours a week, but I should be eligible for overtime, you better believe I am calling the Department of Labor and saying, my boss is not giving me my overtime and I need back overtime and all of the fines and fees that come with that.
Oh man, that's bringing back some real memories. But a few other things that I wanted to add to this is that the alternative that some companies may consider in order to preserve that exempt status is simply elevating that salary and that financial impact, as an alternative to paying the overtime. That's always an option, and that's typically what I see most companies first evaluating when these types of changes happen is okay, well, we'd like to preserve their status. So how much is it going to cost us in order to bring them to that salary? And it's a significant dollar amount. But Joey, you also mentioned something about the duties test that I wanted to mention because on this spring agenda, the Department of Labor is actually also considering modifying the duties test to closely follow who, guess what, follow California standards, which
Yeah.
is um, in the simplest explanation saying that in order to meet the duties test, that 50% of time spent must be solely on exempt duties. So lots of potential changes coming down the pipeline. And the last one that I'll mention that I found the most fascinating of all is that the DOL is actually looking to find a way to essentially create an automatic increase that's tied to the consumer price index so that um, increases similar to what they're considering right now to raise that minimum salary level will be tied to um, essentially tied to a process, like if it was CPI, without having to go through the long legal process of updating it. And I think that that's one of the best things that I've heard the Department of Labor come up with to make it a little easier for employers to plan for this type of change.
Yeah, yeah, I think there will be many different opinions about this, but from your informed perspective, sounds like it's a good idea. Almost set it and forget it because you can look at CPI and then you have to adjust by X%. So it sounds like it's a good deal. And With you being in California, you have the experience here, so um, you know the HR professional in California now can become a national expert in all of these things that are standard in California. Was there any other things that our audience should be paying attention to with this particular topic? And could you remind us the timeline of when we should be picking our heads back up to look at this stuff?
Well, I take a look at it regularly, and I think that um, I would definitely recommend that individuals go out to the reginfo.gov site and or reach out to one of us for support with navigating this at a minimum, like just evaluating what it could mean uh, to their team. But the proposed overtime rule is tentatively slated to be released in October.